it's on. Akash Chopra, thank you. Mate, namaste. आप कैसे हैं?
मैं बहुत अच्छा हूँ. How are you, my friend?
Metika, I think I can say,
Yes, you can.
Acha. My man, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Where are you? Whereabouts are you in the world?
I am in Mumbai. Mumbai happens to be the epicenter of
Yep.
COVID-19 in India. I happen to be here.
And it looks like you have a nice little bit of surrounding around you to be looking after yourself and your family. It looks okay.
I'm all right actually. So really fortunate to be where I am right now. I moved places a few months before. In fact, in January, late January is when I moved places. So fortunately, I'm at a place where I'm not crammed. At least I have a view. I can stay there. There's slightly bigger space. Kids need it, and you can never complain about it.
Mate, you're looking fit and well and healthy, and the hair looks pristine, my man. You've done a great job there.
Yeah, wifey cut my hair yesterday, so she's done a great job.
She's done a really good job. You never have to pay for a haircut again. Well done.
No.
Hey, my man. Hey, thanks for joining us. Be a interesting chat because you've had a playing career that was a lot shorter than you would have liked, but you've maximized everything on the back of that, which is a great sort of transition from playing into another part of your career, which is going well. Now, your playing career wasn't very long, was it?
It wasn't actually. You're absolutely right. And I thought you would be mentioning that my playing career was shorter than my talking career. And
No.
I would have told you, yes, now we know what is easier. Talking is a lot easier than playing. So this can continue for as long as you wish. Playing career, of course, didn't really pan out the way it was supposed to. But then we all are not as fortunate to end up playing 100 test matches. But then a lot of us are not fortunate enough to actually play for our country, represent our country. So I'm still the 245th cricketer. I was a part of a couple of fantastic tours. Yes, in hindsight, I should have done things differently. But then you can't really turn the clock back, can you?
What does that hindsight say that you could have done differently? Now, in terms of your domestic career leading up to getting picked for India, and then when you were a part of the Indian team, what could you have, or what would you have done?
Okay, a couple of things, and I'm sure you might just relate to it as well. One, a very key factor, important thing that actually occurs to you only when you become wiser. There are two things: scoring runs and knowing how to score runs, taking wickets and knowing how to take wickets. So they're two completely different beasts. I was scoring runs, so I had scored about 5,000 plus first-class runs when I played for India. So runs were happening on their own and not the other way around, where I didn't know how to really construct an innings. However much I may have thought I did not. And that understanding of how to score runs came in a lot later. It came in, I think, 3 years after I got dropped. I went to England, played a lot of league cricket there, and understood my game a lot better. And understanding the game, which is a term that's very loosely used in the cricketing world, it means absolutely everything, because once you know your game inside out, you know how you're going to react, you know when you're actually likely to get out, and these things are gold dust. And I had no clue. When I played for India, I had no clue how I had to actually graduate and how to really know where I was in terms of where the game was flowing. And secondly, when I played for India, I was assigned a job, and I thought that was the be all and end all of my existence, that once you play for India, you are representing 1.1 or 1.2 billion people, and you are the fortunate one. You are the one who's been told to do a job, and then come what may, do that job properly to the best of your abilities. I did that, but then at some stage I may have actually become a little satisfied that I'm doing my job which was assigned to me, and not really understanding that 40s, 50s are good enough for the team on a certain day. But they don't take you very far as a cricketer. So quite a few things. Yeah. But then in hindsight, once again, we could change a lot of things. We would.
Did you when you're playing your domestic cricket, did you get the opportunity to play in the same way in the Indian team? You just said that you were given a job to do in the Indian team. Was that the same as your domestic role that you were doing naturally, or was it a slightly different? Did you have to do asked to do something slightly different?
Well, a lot different actually, because I remember playing first class cricket, and first class cricket, I won't say I was like a swashbuckling batsman who would actually score a century of 70 balls, but I would get my century in 160 balls for sure.
Sure.
So I was a free-flowing opener as a test opener could be in a longer format, say 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You would expect an opener to play a certain way. I was pretty much in the same mold. Would try to dominate spinners. I would accelerate as I would play along. I did have a lot of patience, so that was a gift that I may have developed unconsciously, or I was just born with it. And when I played for India, what happened was that I remember one game actually against New Zealand. That was my second test match. I played a pull shot and got a boundary, and Craig McMillan was bowling. I mean, everybody should actually hit boundaries every single time he bowls a short ball. So I came out, I hit a pull, got a boundary, tea break. I was out. John Wright, another Kiwi. He was in my ears, giving me a proper earful that what the hell are you thinking, mate? What exactly did you do there? I said the ball was short. I played it along the ground. I got a boundary, John. What more? Like, what is my fault? He said, that's not your job. There is Virendra Sehwag at the other end who's supposed to hit all the boundaries. Your job is to minimize risk. Playing a pull shot against a fast bowler, even if the ball is short, a pull or a cut is going to be a risky proposition. So just shelve these shots. You are here because the fact was that those two test matches, that series against New Zealand, my debut series, was just precursor to the symphony. The symphony was the tour to Australia. So everything was, even though we were playing on Indian pitches, flatter pitches, both test matches were actually drawn games. We couldn't even yield a result. We were still planning for Australia. So thinking as if we are playing Australia in Australia while we were playing New Zealand in India. So since that was my first series, I didn't know better. The moment he said, don't play pull, don't play cut, I said, all right, that's it. Then I'm not supposed to do these things. So if you don't play a cut shot, you don't play a pull shot. Not that I was a great puller of the cricket ball, but I could play the cut shot. I could score runs on the back foot. Yeah. How am I supposed to score runs in Australia? Like, there is no chance you'll score a lot of runs driving the ball down the ground. Who's going to bowl you half volleys? So I ended up spending a lot of time because I knew where my off stump was. My patience came to my rescue as well. But yes, I played a different role.
Do you wish? Of course you do. But do you wish that okay? So John Wright was the coach at the time. Do you wish that he had have just given you the freedom to play? Look, you've been picked to play for India because of what you've done domestically, the amount of runs you've scored. Do you wish that John had have just said, "Look, go and do your thing. Look, you got Vidu at the other end who's going to score plenty of runs anyway. You just play your innings and do what you're naturally, what you've been picked to do."
I don't hold it against him, honestly. And I genuinely don't. I'll tell you why. Because as a coach of a side, you have to look beyond individuals. So you are a small piece in the bigger, larger picture. So if that piece, and I could understand where he was coming from, because our previous experiences from tours to Australia were that there were no opening partnerships. We were losing. I think 1999 was the tour before I went. 6 innings, the highest was 13, the opening partnership. The aggregate, I think, was 45. So in 6 innings, both openers put together and managed only 45 runs. Yeah. So you knew that if you had the likes of Rahul Dravid, Sachin Tendulkar, VVS Lakshman, Saurav Ganguly to follow, of course you can't change Virendra Sehwag the way he does. You have to find a way to take the sheen of that new Kookaburra ball, and the moment you do that, you knew that you had the batting to go even with the Australian team. And if we had scored enough runs, results would have been favorable. So I can understand where he was coming from. So not holding that against him. But yes, when you look back at things from an individual selfish perspective, you do feel that things could have been different.
Now, this is something that I maybe noticed in the Hess and McCullum era of when New Zealand were playing, that from the outside looking in, it seemed like they picked players to play their role. So they picked openers, and they picked the two openers that would best complement each other, but they picked them to do what they did. The 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, etc. They picked the players that they wanted to play that role in the team. So there was no one was having to learn a new role. Very few times did a number 4 end up batting at number 6 because they had a little reshuffle. The order stayed sort of static, given that these players know how to play that role. And I'm just kind of wondering, in that case, then maybe you were don't take this the wrong way, maybe you were the wrong guy that they picked for that style of play they were trying to play, and that then counted against you.
See, there are two ways of looking at it. I understand what you're saying, and it happens very often in T20 cricket. Now that when you pick a team, you play the player, you give the role that is ideally suited for him, and then you just keep him there. The moment, no matter how good you are. For example, if I were to tell Rohit Sharma to bat at 5 in a T20 game, or Virat Kohli to bat at 6, it's not going to work out, right? But then, see, there are only so many openers that are playing at the domestic circuit at that point in time. I was already a part of the India A structure. I was one of the highest run scorers in those tours. So my graduation was almost automatic. Plus the fact that a lot of people believed that my technique was quite okay. So that had to work in my favor. And see, that again, so one is, of course, that. Second is that when I got to my 40s and 50s, nobody actually stopped me from going on from 50, 60, 70 to 120. The funny thing, what actually happened is I was up against Australia. I was up against Pakistan. So Australia, they were relentless. They would not give you boundary balls. So if they're not giving you boundary balls, if you spend that much of time, so it also matters your initiation, where it happens, who it happens against. So if it's happening, say, against a lesser team, over a period of time, you already played 100 odd balls. You and I know that you'll get a few boundary balls and you will actually be away. And suddenly you're amongst the runs, and then you're free flowing and nobody's actually bothered. You've got your first test century and off you go. But if that doesn't happen and you're up against an opposition which is going to challenge you every single time, every session, over after over, you end up either losing concentration or getting a good ball that dismisses you. And they are likely to bowl those wicket-taking balls a lot more than a slightly lesser inferior opposition in their backyard. So a lot of things were happening at that point in time, and I'm a firm believer of one thing, and that everything actually happens for a reason. So we try and change our outlooks. We tend to look back at things differently and wish they had happened differently. But they do happen for a reason. That I was playing at that time. I had played a certain way. There was a certain kind of reputation. India needed someone. I was there. Yes, things could have turned out differently. They didn't. It's all right.
Look, it's great. You know, it turns out that you play cricket for India, and you never change it. But there's just this part of me that I played a T20, and one of the other bowlers didn't want to open, and that kind of left me to be one of the opening bowlers. And I knew that I was never a T20 opening bowler. I wasn't skillful enough to take wickets, but I could maybe bowl third and do something. And I sort of put my hand up and said, look, I'll open the bowling. And that was probably one of the worst things I could have done, because that I didn't do the job very well, and it then counted it against me sort of onwardly. And I just look at players that have been asked to do roles that are maybe not natural to them, and I kind of feel for them, and I kind of have this sympathy, empathy that that's not fair. You're being judged on a skill or on a job that isn't the one that you've been practicing for all of this time. And I kind of wish that maybe cricket is getting there now, where we are picking the right players as opposed to picking players that need to make a change. Do you think we are changing in terms of how teams are picked? The spots are more accurate to their domestic, to their personalities, to how they do domestically?
Yes and no. I completely understand what you exactly are saying, inferring to, and it does make a difference that you don't judge an electrician on the basis of how good a plumber he is. So that's what you actually mean, and I totally understand. But then KL Rahul, we are making him keep and we are making him bat at 5. So this is modern day Indian cricket, very strong unit. And the fact is that we are telling a guy, you're nice, you're good, we can't drop you, but why don't you just keep? You start keeping and you bat at number 5 because you're actually doing a decent job. And thereby denying him an opportunity to actually open the innings where he's excellent at.
Yeah.
He's one of the 3 Indian players who've scored a T20 international 100, and we still are telling him to bat at number 5 because we can't make him open. So while a lot of emphasis is on getting right players for the right roles, but then those lines do get blurred once in a while. I think that's happening with KL Rahul at the moment.
Do you see it? Do you see it all so differently now that you're on the other side of the rope? That you're now kind of picking teams and trying to see inside what's actually happening and trying to guess that you see the whole game differently. You don't quite see it as simple as it is when you're a player.
Of course, it completely changes your perspective. You understand a little more because it's like you're inside a teacup. That's your world. You can't really make head or tail of it beyond a point. But when you're looking at it from the outside, you understand it a lot better because you can see all moves happening at the same time. And while you're inside the teacup, your view is very myopic. So in that respect, you understand it a lot better. And that's why, like you said, so currently I've got a lot of sympathy for KL Rahul. I keep saying, you're not doing the right thing. Just because he's able to do this, you're penalizing him for being so good.
Yeah.
But tomorrow you'll also be judging him for scoring 70 or like one day he won't be able to do that well at 9, 5, 6, 7, and you won't let him open again because he's failed at 5, 6, 7. So you do understand, but then it also makes you realize that why certain things are happening a certain way, which when you are in the middle of that storm, you don't really understand as much.
Did you find that that step from domestic cricket, from India A cricket to then playing Test matches? How did you find that step? Not from a skill perspective, but from a how do I become a Test cricketer? I played my first couple of Test matches and I tried to be a Test cricketer, which was just the most ridiculous thing. Looking back, I tried to be a Test cricketer. I tried to bowl Test match pass, and I tried to do all these things that I had never really done. Did you have any of those sort of things happen to you that you can look back on now?
So initially, I did not see or did not even try doing things differently as far as my first couple of Test matches are concerned, because nobody had seen me, so including the team management. They knew that he plays a certain way, but then I started playing. I got a couple of half centuries in my second Test. I had a decent first Test, 42 and 32, so it was not too bad to begin with. New Zealand, New Zealand was not one of the strongest sides. We played on some flat pitches. That generally happens in India, 2 drawn games. So till that time, it was all fine. The moment I went to Australia and then to Pakistan, things changed quite a bit in terms of my mindset as well, wherein it actually happened the other way around, because after that I got dropped very quickly. I had one India A tour, I was injured, came back, and then in fact my last 3 Test matches happened over a period of about 8-9 months. 5 Test matches. I did not play last 2 Test matches back to back. So I played one in Lahore, then I was dropped in Rawalpindi. I played in Bangalore, dropped in Chennai, played in Nagpur, and then dropped. And it happened over like about 10 months against 2 different oppositions, Pakistan in Pakistan, Australia and India. And that series, India actually lost to Australia. So what happened then was that that impacted the way I actually played domestic cricket after that. So for the next couple of seasons, I did not try too hard to be a Test cricketer at the highest level, but then I tried very hard to be a Test cricketer playing the first class cricket level now. So that was actually, that got my goat in the end, that I just could not do it right. I ended up, in fact, so the joy of playing the sport actually just evaporated because I was obsessed with making it back into the Indian team. I understood that nobody told me, but I somehow realized that if I can spend so much time against Australia in Australia, Pakistan in Pakistan, man, I can do that in first class cricket for fun. So I ended up batting entire day for 97 runs. I had I would score 50s, but I would not score a century.
Sure.
So I was getting runs, but not getting runs because I was not batting fluently enough. And I was not even thinking of batting. I was thinking only about scoring runs and getting back. So objectives were completely lost. They were warped. And so for me it happened that way, that I was playing, and then I carried this burden on my shoulders that, Akash Chopra, the test cricketer, has come
Yeah.
out to play for Delhi, so now he must play in a certain fashion. So that certain fashion was not the right fashion, I realized 2 years later.
No, it's that's exactly the next point that I was going to go into. Coming back down into domestic cricket, coming back down to play first class cricketer as a test cricketer, no matter how well you've done, even if you've had a good start to your test career or a bad start, you still come back down into first class cricket, domestic cricket, as a test cricketer, and that ego, that perceived whatever it is, that you have to now perform to that test cricket level, that's one of the biggest burdens I think that cricketers face, is coming back down and having success because you're supposed to have success.
Absolutely. And you know what happens? The other part of the story is that one, you're carrying that ego. So that's absolutely right. Secondly, others are also trying ever so hard to actually dismiss you, because they see, okay, now we are bowling to a test cricketer.
Yeah.
So you don't get your half volleys as easily, as you don't really slip under the radar anymore. You are the focal point, and therefore everybody is trying their best. And you actually in your own head have got some preconceived notions about yourself, that you are now a better player than what you were earlier. It's still the game of, like, it's still the same game: ball, bat, bowler bowls, batsman plays. But those things don't occur to you. And see, with me, what happened was my obsession to come back into the Indian team.
Yeah.
Just in the end, didn't let me enjoy the game. Yeah. And that once the enjoyment goes away, I think that's the worst thing that can happen to a cricketer or a sports person.
So that obsession, did that ever fall away? Did you ever just been able to, so it sounds like it didn't happen, and you didn't just go back to just playing cricket. It sounds like the whole time that you were out of the Indian team, the only focus was to get back in, as opposed to it waning a little bit, it's sort of reducing, and just being able to go, do you know what, let's just play some cricket, let's just do okay.
So it did happen actually, and so first couple of years, so 05, 06 was pretty bad. I was just completely fighting a battle with myself. It was as if I was in a cave, and it was kind of dark everywhere. Couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But 07 season was when it actually changed. It changed by my taking a trip to Mohali. I went to Mohali from Delhi. I scheduled an appointment with Michael Atherton. Because I idolized him as an opener, like in my formative years. Yeah. So I spoke to him, and he asked me a couple of questions. And one of the questions was that, are you enjoying the game? I said, see, the right answer would be yes. I mean, I am, but the correct answer is that no, I'm not. I'm not enjoying the game as much. So that 15 minutes that I spent with him, it didn't really give me like path-breaking insights into how to make it back into the Indian team and all of that. He told me only two things, and they stayed with me. One is, as an opener, all of us are going to get a good ball, we'll get out. Let's make peace with the fact that a good ball will get us out. And as an opener, you'll get more than anybody else. Yep. All right, period. Second, don't forget for a moment why you play this game, or why you played this game 20 years ago. When you picked up the bat for the first time, why did you pick up the bat? So I took that lesson with me to England. I played again a season of league cricket in England, and came back a different player completely. And that happened to be the best season of my life in first class cricket, where I scored as many as 3 double centuries. I got 1400 plus runs in days cricket. I've got another 380 odd runs in 3 games in list A cricket. Delhi won the Ranji Trophy. We won the Duleep Trophy. We did all of that. I was the highest run scorer in the country. And suddenly I was again back knocking at the doors of the Indian cricket team. So it all happened. So 2 years I was like, I was lost. And after 2 years, I came back from the wilderness and I was fine.
So how did you then change that playing for joy versus playing to get back into the Indian team? What did you do? How did you, obviously, yes, this season over here playing league cricket, where it's a lot more fun. There is a lot more joking around, whether it be in the game or after the game. But how did you find that real kid naivety about, that boyish naivety that just says we just love playing games and competitiveness. How did you find that?
Okay, a few things actually happened, and so the 2 years that I was trying to get it back into the side, I did a lot of soul searching. Uh, I ended up looking inside a lot more,
And
inwards a lot more.
I bet you changed your technique 15 times as well.
I did change a few things, not radically, honestly,
Okay.
no. Because my technique was pretty sorted all my life, so that's something that stayed with me throughout.
Yeah.
The change needed to be like a switch had to be flipped, just mentally more than anything else. And when I talk about those 2 years, so soul searching meant that I went reading spirituality. I went to a guru as well.
Mm-hmm.
I did a couple of courses. I went into silence for 3 days. And then I did all of that. I started searching for the purpose of the life itself, asking questions, reading all kinds of philosophies, theories, and then I think so everything actually contributed. So it just cleared up the cobwebs a little because you started seeing perspective. Because one question that I keep asking was that when will I be happy? Because that was a key question.
Yeah.
So the answer actually came back when I was a kid. I thought, see, this is what we do. We put happiness, we assign happiness to goals.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a kid, you're playing cricket. One day, if I play for Delhi, under 19 cricket, under 15 cricket, oh, I'll be very happy. But the moment you get picked, you say, no, now I need runs. If I score runs, I'll be happy. And then it just keeps going that way. So now you play first India under 19, then first class cricket, then India. The moment you play for India, that happiness stays for about half an hour. And then you say, oh, now I must score a century and I must play 100 test matches. And I bet that the guy who plays 100 test matches, even that guy is not completely happy and satisfied. He says 150 is the new mark. Oh, 10,000 runs is the new mark.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I realized at that point in time, because I was just asking questions left, right, center. Had some people around me who were at least enlightened, and they guided me on that path. They just asked me, like, so that I was searching for answers, whether they were found in books or somewhere else. That if you're not happy, you're not happy. So happiness. So that was one part of it. Understanding that happiness is not assigned to playing for India. Happiness is just playing the game itself, because that's what I love doing. And I stopped thinking about getting picked. I came very close to getting picked again, but it did not destroy me at all. I felt bad because I thought I should have been there. Anil Kumble was the captain. He told me that you've done everything yet you could have done to play for India again. Because in 4 months, I had about 1,000 first-class runs. India had to go to Australia again. And I was not picked. So I was like almost an obvious choice, but I was not picked. And I was writing a book at that time as well. I was actually keeping notes. So I wrote like a note every single day of the first class circuit. And then I invested myself in different things. I started writing a lot more. In fact, I started writing properly at that point in time. I started playing for the sheer joy of playing, helping the team win. And everything actually started falling in place from there onwards. So yeah, that exactly how it actually changed because of a lot of things that happened simultaneously.
And there's a lot to unpack in there in terms of things that you did to find happiness, to find joy, and the first sort of three things that are, I don't want to say are typical, but from where I come from, they wouldn't happen. You went and saw a spiritual, went and saw a guru, and you did 3 days of silence. Now, Akash, I know you reasonably well. 3 days of silence would have been one of the hardest things.
I know 3 minutes is more.
But they are things that from New Zealand, from a Western sort of society, we might go and see a psychologist, or go and do something along those lines. Think about some kind of philosophy of what you want out of the game. But to go and see some spiritual, go and see a guru, and do 3 days of silence. Now these are things that are completely foreign to me. Can you give me an insight? Because I am genuinely interested, because that's a real different way from a Western perspective to go and find enlightenment, or go and find yourself. You didn't hit to Goa and smoke some of that stuff down there, did you?
No, not at all, mate. never got into substance abuse ever. In fact, I'm a teetotaler. Don't smoke. I'm a teetotaler, so that was never a refuge.
Yeah.
See, I think everything actually happens for a reason. Once again, something that I said at the top as well.
Yeah.
I remember. So there are moments that change you. There are things that change you as well. So I remember traveling by train to one place to the other, and I had a choice at the bookstall to pick up a book. So I was thinking either go Blink or Tipping Point. I think Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell, or go with Communications with God. I mean, I was 20, whatever, early 20s, late 20s, maybe 26, 27. I picked up that Communications with God for whatever reason. Conversations with God. And it's a trilogy. So I ended up reading 3 books. And then they started opening up a different realm of experiences, thoughts to you that you never knew existed anyway. So once you go down that path, you don't really feel that you're doing this to become a better cricketer. You're not trying to score more runs again. You're not trying to make it back into the Indian team. Suddenly there is more purpose, and there are questions that are more pertinent, larger than just having an impact on the game itself. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, and I'm not kidding. So what happened? Why happiness? Because there was one little phase where anything that I did, whether I was watching something, I was reading something, I was talking to someone, I was listening to something, there was a constant question that was popping up. When will you be happy? So when will you be happy? So when will you be happy? I said, shut up, man. This is enough. Now it's like you can see it as a sign. You can completely ignore it either. Like it's entirely up to you. But if you are already like started going down that path where you've started asking questions that you would never ask otherwise. So those questions like when will you be happy suddenly became a very important thing that somebody's asking me, whether it's the universe asking me or whoever, I don't know, but I need to find an answer to it because I'm watching a movie, got that movie, and when will you be happy?
Yeah.
All right. So that happened. I think maybe it's a very Indian thing. Maybe it's not an Indian thing. Let's be very fair, because everybody finds their own way of dealing with certain things in life. Yeah. Failure will always teach you a lot more than success. And in my case, I just ended up asking a lot of questions.
But you're asking questions of yourself. You're asking questions of your own self and trying to find those answers. And that's some of the worst times as people, you know, on the back of failure. We always, you know, what am I doing wrong? What did I do? Was I not watching the ball? Was I not concentrating? Was my footwork out? Was my back lift wrong? Those, when we're asking ourselves those questions, they can be the darkest times. So do I assume that they were pretty dark times in terms of your self-value, self-worth, or were you still kind of normal?
So these were dark times, yes. But then, you know, again, it may just be very like it's a phrase, and these are things that we tend to say to feel good. That night is darkest before dawn, for example. Sure. So the thing is, there was not enough self-doubts as far as my cricket was concerned. So I was not asking questions about, am I still a good cricketer? Or should I just completely change the way I bat? Should I start batting left-handed or whatever? So something. So I was not asking those questions. So when you stop asking those questions, then cricket actually became very insignificant, irrelevant to a certain extent, where I thought that, okay, let me quit cricket because it doesn't make sense. So I did think about that. I didn't, instead of like thinking now of scoring a lot of runs and getting back into the Indian team, I went to the other extreme and said, it's okay, even if you don't play, it's fine. Life's not going to change. There is more to life. So that was
where I am. Because being able to, look, I was just talking to Shane Bond just earlier, and he was talking about, you know, sort of almost being carefree. Look, I've got another job. If I don't succeed at this, I've got another job. I can go and do that. And so that freedom gave him, that knowledge gave him freedom to just go and play some cricket. But that's quite a hard thing to develop.
So I didn't have an alternate option, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's
what I was meaning. You probably didn't have the alternate option. So you can't just be as carefree as, oh, well, if it doesn't work, I'll go and do this.
No, there was no other option available to me because all I knew of me was cricket for better part of my life. So what actually happened, I think, when I went onto this spiritual path, so to speak, and I followed a guru and his teachings, a lot of it was about detachment.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start reading a lot about detachment, and when you start disassociating yourself from the physical being or physical work that you are actually indulging in, then the happiness and sorrow starts dissipating. That there is no happiness, there is no sorrow. So if that's the case, then you start behaving a little differently. So that, I think, what actually led me to believe that, okay, forget it, yeah, don't play cricket, it's all right. Not that I had another option, but I may open a sports shop for all I know. I'll do something. And something, what is that something I didn't know?
The to, now this is probably a little bit stereotypical, but and excuse the way how I frame the question. Is a guru to you, to your culture, how we would maybe see Western culture would see a psychologist? Is there an element that they kind of there's or is there less stigma? Is there less? I'm not going to say stigma, wrong word, but going to see a guru is a lot. That's very accepted, isn't it? That's something a lot of people would do versus going to see a psychologist, say, in a Western culture.
Okay, so I also went to a psychologist.
Sure. Okay.
So, yes. So
cool.
I went to a psychologist. So I went to a psychologist as well, and one of my uncles is a psychiatrist as well, and I ended up speaking a lot to him as well. And then my bouncing back and actually starting like rekindling my love with the sport itself was down to that psychiatrist that I met. The uncle that I'm talking about, he stays in Pondicherry, and he's Arya's father, by the way.
Oh, nice.
So he's the one who actually and he's spiritually very, very enlightened. So he's a psychiatrist, but he's also a spiritual, not a leader or a guru, but he's someone who gives a lot of talks. He writes a lot about different aspects of life, including death, etc. So he was one of my sounding boards. So going to a guru is not something that, okay, so I go to you and I start talking. See, guru is not that accessible.
Okay.
So it's not that accessible. Yes, in India or in this part of the world, it's easier and it's more acceptable. What you're saying is absolutely right. Going to a psychologist may just also be seen as there is some amount of taboo that he's going through mental problems, so to speak. Going to a guru is absolutely fine. He's looking for light and going away from darkness. So yes, that's what you're saying is absolutely right, spot on. But guru doesn't really sit in front of you and discuss things with you. Sure. He's too busy. He's got plenty of other things in life. So you end up reading a lot what he's written. And then you draw inferences that, okay, what you think is right. So I went to one guy to begin with, then I moved away from him, and then I went to someone else. Then I read something else. I read all kinds of things. So it wasn't as if I was associated with a guru and then I stayed with him for the rest of my life. I followed his doctrine, so to speak, for a little while. And then I moved on because that was perhaps not working. That actually led me to believe, detach, forget, don't play. And then I realized that, okay, no, the other doctrine was that, man, everybody has a purpose in life. There's a calling, so to speak. So maybe your calling is to play cricket. So forget about all of it. Just play. Don't play to play for India. But you've done this for the last 20 years. So why are you just giving it up? Don't give it up. Just play for the sheer joy of playing. So I read all from this end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. So it was a nice growing experience, I think.
It fills you with like whatever success or failure on the back of that. It fills you with knowledge, though, doesn't it? That now becomes learned. You become not a guru, but you become someone that has fought the path. You've sort of fought, and you've done all, by the sounds of it, you've done almost everything you could have to have had success in that off the field kind of way. That now gives you a great perspective looking at cricket, doesn't it? It sort of opens your eyes to alternate theories on player success and failure.
See, it does, but the other part of this wonderful story is that we tend to forget. So these lessons are there. They stay with you for a little while, and they are very overwhelming at one point in time, and then they start fading away a little bit by bit, and then you become completely engrossed in your day-to-day and mundane stuff,
Hmm.
and a part of you is still that person, but major part of you is now a person who's going from one thing to the other, as all of us do mechanically, and not always spiritually enlightened being as we try to be, but just as a normal human being, moving from one thing to the other, joy, sorrows, happiness, accumulation of good memories or wealth or whatever. That's what we end up doing, because you've got two kids, you start thinking that way as well. Just give me a moment, time. Just give me a moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're with media and doing commentary and doing your own stuff off your own back. You do get, and I think this is the bit that I'm sort of alluding to. You do now get to step back and dissect from different angles, scenarios and situations that you've seen, and you get the opportunity to now give an alternate description of, well, here's maybe outside looking in what is happening, and so you're filled now with a lot of knowledge that, yeah, you maybe have forgotten a lot of it, but it's still there. It still resonates, doesn't it?
It does actually. It helps you. It gives you perspective, a slightly different one. So definitely. And what actually helps is that you see patterns developing a lot more.
Yeah.
And they happen at a very subconscious level. You're not consciously seeing them as they are happening, but you see them. You see them because if you're watching it intently, you see patterns emerging, and suddenly your brain will send you a signal. This is going to happen, and you suddenly sound very intelligent and wise. But I think it's like artificial intelligence or machine learning. When you see a lot of things happening, one after the other, the brain actually starts processing it differently, and you see patterns, and start seeing not the future, so to speak, but yes, the likelihood of something happening.
I absolutely agree with that. You start seeing a pattern, and it's subconscious. You just start seeing something, and you're not quite sure what it is, and you just get that feeling. You're like, and I think you get that because you've fought and you've been in that sort of scenario, so you recognize that pattern, maybe intrinsically, maybe from the inside, and it's a strange world. How do you? Now, Indian media is tough in terms of what the public will say of you. How do you deal with that, my man? How do you deal with saying a player isn't doing so well, this player should be playing for them, and then you deal with the backlash of India passion about cricket? How do you deal with that, Akash? Oh dear. You there? I lost you there.
I thought, yeah. So, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Sorry.
Okay. So the thing is, there's a very simple philosophy that I've followed from day one. Say it as you see it, and
it's not that easy.
Sorry.
It's not as easy as that, though, is it?
It is easy. If you start doing it on a daily basis, you will find it easy. It's not that difficult. Yeah. Eventually, people will figure out that this guy he may have understood it differently, but he doesn't have an agenda. See, people will always have issues with you if there is an agenda that you're driving. If you are just saying as you're seeing it, people will start accepting that he is like that. This is how he's seeing it, and this is how he's saying it. And secondly, something that Sanjay Manjrekar told me long time ago was that your loyalty belongs to your audience and not to the players. So be honest with your opinions, as honest as possible, What I've learned one thing though, that initially, like in my early years as a broadcaster, I would just go critical. If I had to go critical, I'd go critical, without really thinking about, okay, anything. Say
Yeah.
it as I see it. But then I was, so once again, Arya's father, my spiritual guru, so to speak, my go-to guy. So I spoke to him about just things that we obviously, in a business of opining, just voicing opinions. What he taught me and I learned was that every opinion can be phrased differently.
Yeah.
And then when, and this is something that you also are taught when you start coaching, that there is always a sandwich approach, that there is a nice bread, then you go pickle, and then you go slightly critical, and then you patch it up with a nice piece of bread on the other side. uh, so what I've learned now is that, say what you want to say, but then you don't always have to keep hitting the nail on the head. There are ways to do the same thing, maybe more politely. So I've become more polite, but that hasn't stopped me from saying the truth. I still say the truth.
There you go. There you go. Hey, going back to some playing cricket. When there's some good days, obviously, and for some reason we remember the bad days more often, but we have some great days in there. What are some of those great days, and what are the feelings that you still remember and have from those?
From the cricketing days is what you're
Yeah,
asking?
from playing
Oh,
days.
so Adelaide Test match was phenomenal because we came back from behind. We won the game. That was sensational. It did leave a little thing in my mind that I should have contributed a little more, because that's what you always felt. Actually, I always felt, even though it's a team game and team has won and you're very happy and you're celebrating, but deep down, a feeling always stayed with me whether I've contributed to this win or not.
See, this is
Uh,
that thing, is that we're never happy. We're never ever happy. When even when we get runs and we win, or get wickets and we win, there's always like, oh well, there was this and there was that and there was this and there was that. Have you ever had a pure moment where it's just like life is good?
Life is good. I think my
Have you?
first couple of test matches was, so it doesn't even have to be actually from the time that I played for India.
Yeah.
It actually happened afterwards. That season that I played, the
Yeah.
one season, 2007 season that I played, life was good, man. I've never experienced life as good as that year, where I got out for a duck as well from time to time, but then it was just bliss. I just played. I remember actually hitting a six to reach to a double century. Why would I do that? I would never do that, but I did it. I did it because I was not thinking. I just reacted. There was a spinner bowling. I stepped out. I hit him out of the park, and at six, and I got double century. I mean, crazy. Akash would never do it. But that was just bliss. So I would just continue to play. It was 1 year of absolute bliss throughout.
Isn't it? Isn't it amazing that this happens to a lot of people, and a lot of them do get a second chance, if you like. They do get a chance. They go away and they find this bliss. They find this. It's cool, everything is just, everything is just good and sweet and happy, and then and some people are fortunate to get picked again, if you like, and they can take that through. So there's a kind of a scenario where you're just wishing and praying that you could have had that little second go in that feeling, in that embodiment of whatever that is.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. But uh,
Oh no, I don't.
have.
Not as a regret, but there's just this.
No, I agree.
A lot of players get that opportunity to come back and go, it's cool, yeah. It's everything.
Yeah, it is very cool. It is very cool, and I came ridiculously close to that as well, so which is great. But funny thing is, I'm that my second innings, I've got more than what I actually got in the first innings. So the kind of love that I get now, see, commentary is half as difficult as actually playing the game, or maybe a quarter, maybe 1/10. But then the fact is, I've seen people actually carrying posters and banners into the grounds of my name and my picture. I was like, wow, I could not expect that kind of love. But and this is like appreciation of a different kind. It's all right, yeah, it's fine. I didn't get that opportunity there. But then I'm getting this, which I never thought could ever happen. Even when I was growing up playing cricket, playing for India, you thought that everything is when you're playing for India, not after that. So this is something that that's been sensational. The kind of love that I get now, I feel truly blessed that I must have done something right someday to get this much.
Look, I have this. Look, I have a philosophy, and the people that fight and try the hardest do end up being the best sort of analyzing, they can analyze a situation, analyze a player, because they know a lot of what's going on. And I think, you know, you sort of you sit back now as established media, and you must go, you know, if this had been easy, I probably wouldn't be here right now. Because it was hard, I am here right now. Do you see where I'm going with that?
100%.
Yeah.
So if I played 100 test matches, and I would become complacent, because I'd be sitting on my laurels and telling everyone, you know, if I say this, this is how it is.
This is how.
And now, if I played only 10 test matches, I need to make sure that you can't punch holes in what I say. Yeah. The only thing that you can punch holes is my career statistics. So please go ahead and say that he's played only this many test matches. What does he know? But don't have a problem with what I have said. Have a problem with me, it's okay. Don't have a problem with what I have said. Is the simple philosophy, and that can happen only if you played 10 test matches. Might not happen if you played 110.
Well, you're still one of the special crew. You're still one of the special bunch, man. There's so very few people get to do those things. And you just said before about you now walk into stadiums and there's people with a poster and it's got your name and your picture on it. There's the best moment of my career had absolutely nothing to do with playing. It was walking off at a lunch break, and there were two boys. And one of the boys says, I want to be O'Brien. I want to be O'Brien. Because we always, as young kids, we always want to be a certain player. And that moment right there of this kid wanting to be me was, that was it. I was like properly the best moment you couldn't give me any amount of wickets or any amount of batting runs to have that there. And so you walking into a ground and now having that sort of love is, it just makes it all worthwhile. Every single thing is like, everything's, you know, it just
absolutely
nice. Feels good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, mate.
I'll let you go because I know you've got busy things. Mate, looks like you've got a beautiful house. Looks like you've locked down well and everything's safe and sound in Mumbai. I knew too many older people who still call it Bombay, so, you know.
Fair enough. Fantastic. Thank you so much, and wish you all the best.
We'll
spend a lot of time with your kids.
Nice one. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Yeah,
take care. Thank you. Thank
you
so much.
Hi, Ian O'Brien here. Thanks for getting to the end of this 108 with IOB. I'd appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe, please. But also leave us a message down below in the comments about what was your most interesting or favourite part of this chat. Thanks a lot. Love ya.